Hi there, welcome to this special author interview edition of No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction Podcast. Back in January, we had Contributor Appreciation Month, where we randomly selected 4 of our contributors, volunteers, who will allow us to share their work on our show for acknowledgement but no pay, and offered them a prize and a chance to tell us a little bit about themselves and their writing career. Coming up today, Nels Hanson. Nels' short story, The Silver Horseshoe, was featured on episode 37 of the show. Today, in his recorded interview blurb, Nels talks to us about how growing up on a historic family farm in California influences him in his writing, about the constant thread that weaves its way through his writing, and about his other experiences and inspirations. Nels and I were unable to connect, but he was kind enough to record answers to my interview questions, which we're going to play for you, and we really hope you enjoy hearing from Nels. At the end of the interview, he'll tell you how you can reach out and connect with him and find more of his work, and we hope you'll visit us at noextrawords.wordpress.com to learn more about our show and all of our fabulous contributors. And now, here's Nels.
I've been kindly asked by No Extra Words producer and editor Chris Baker Dersch to respond to 5 questions on the publication of my short story, The Silver Horseshoe. For conciseness and clarity, I've written out my answers. The first question, tell us about yourself, your background, your life as a writer, what inspired you as a writer. I grew up in a 3-room house on a corner of my grandparents' small raisin grape and tree fruit farm outside the town of Selma, 17 miles south of Fresno in the San Joaquin Valley of California. My great-grandfather purchased the land from Leland Stanford's railroad in the early 1880s, and my first memories were rich in family and pioneer history. There were still plow horses in the corral, parked hay wagons and early hay rakes and cultivators, and a shed with long 2-man saws and double-bladed axes. In the 1950s and early 60s, there were no mercury lights, and when the sun went down, the land and sky were utterly dark. On the flat land, the stars nearly touching the horizons and forming a perfect dome overhead with constellations that seemed to fit together like pieces of a puzzle. There was a pond, and birds and animals were everywhere, and we had many dogs of every description. There were also the very poor from Oklahoma who helped work the farm, and at school the children were Hispanic or descendants of the Dust Bowl. All of them remain vivid and loved in memory. I later earned degrees in literature and creative writing from the University of California at Santa Cruz and the University of Montana, but my early years on the farm, among multiple generations, and in later years my life as a farmer are the influences that are deepest, a life largely spent outdoors through 4 seasons of changing landscape and fierce weather. The summers were brutally hot, sometimes 100 degrees for 40 days in a row, but the valley floor of irrigated fields was emerald green. The autumns after the last fruit harvest changed the land to yellow and gold, before the fall rains and the first frost, and all the trees and vines dropped their leaves as a gray, cold winter of tule fog began. Spring was glorious, almond, plum, and peach orchards, all blooming and perfuming the balmy air. And always to the east, the high Sierra Nevadas overlooking the flat plain, and to the west, the lower, rounded Coast Range, and then the Pacific. Each day seemed like a life, with the sun climbing the tall mountains, crossing the wide land, and then at sunset falling to the sea. The air was clear then, the population small, and I suppose it was, at least for me, a kind of Eden. My story, The Silver Horseshoe, is based on a real man, a rich one from England, who shod his horses with silver shoes and pastured his stock on my grandfather's farm. The second question, what about the short story or flash fiction form appeals to you? Do you write in other forms, and if so, how do you approach writing a short story differently? Short stories and flash fictions are necessarily like snapshots, characters and images caught in a sudden frame of time. The surface action has to imply background and backstory, and the plot move forward on its own. suggesting rather than supplying the larger lives from which the characters emerge. I've written 4 novels, and in those the handling of time, detail, and motivation all had to be worked out. Longer works, even if they take place over a single day, as in one of my books, are more like murals or movies as compared to single photographs. A short story seems to require one clear-cut idea or feeling, one situation, while a novel is a series of different but interconnected lines of action and emotion that somehow or other have to support a central underlying theme, one that is often only glimpsed clearly as the novel unfolds. You have to live a novel day by day over a period of months or even years. A story you can quickly sketch in and then rewrite and heighten once you have a beginning, middle, and end. To me, a story is closer to a poem, the development of a single tone, whereas long fictions must have multiple movements, rising and falling elements that mirror the feel of life over time, rather than the story's short span, which presents a single emotion or insight. The third question, what inspires you as a reader? This can be books, authors, periodicals, whatever. The sky is the limit. I tend to read less fiction and more nonfiction as I grow older. Essays, biographies, diaries. As with many writers my age, I began as a big reader of Faulkner, Hemingway, and Fitzgerald, in that order. I love Sherwood Anderson, Camus, Kerouac, and Borges, Thomas de Quincey, and Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson. But I suppose the book that obsessed me the longest and made the biggest impact remains Malcolm Lowry's Under the Volcano. It's like a great symphony and has rightly been compared to Dante's Divine Comedy. It's a tragedy, but with a redeeming sense of comedy, and the echoes of some force and intelligence beyond our own. It's been called the greatest Christian novel of the 20th century, which I think it is. Its treatment of synchronicities, fate and chance, destiny, the intrusion of the uncanny, always struck me. I've read most of Carl Jung, and the world of the unconscious and at times the superconscious that Lowry dramatizes and describes is to me profound. I'm also a longtime follower of English poetry, and Lowry's prose is beautiful and poetic with grandeur and pathos. The book can be read over and over for new discoveries. Everything connects with everything else, and not a word or scene or image is there by accident. It's marvelous and more than a bit disturbing. Question number 4. What are your writer dreams? In a perfect world, what would your writing life look like in 5 to 10 years or more? I'd like to see my novels and a collection or two of stories, as well as several finished books of poetry, find commercial publishers. I want to write prose and poetry that explores the mysterious, the hidden, or half-seen. If there is a constant river running through all time and life, I'd like to listen for it and try to capture at least some of its music and meaning. And the last question, how do our listeners get hold of you if they have questions or want to connect? Also, is there anything you are promoting or want to share? I have a niche on LinkedIn, and anyone interested could contact me that way. I've been having luck with online publications, and many of my poems and stories can be found and accessed by Googling Nels Hanson Fiction and Poetry. I have an illustrated book of children's poems, What the Lizard Said, that should be appearing soon.
No Extra Words would like to thank Chanillo.com for their sponsorship of Contributor Appreciation Month and allowing us to reward our fabulous contributors. Chanillo.com, CHANNILLO.com, is the web's best source for serialized literature. Visit them today, find out how you can subscribe to the right number of series for you and support writers, and let them know you appreciate them supporting your favorite podcast. Chanillo.com, that's CHANNILLO.com.